were later fired and I guess charged with embezzlement. But in any event, like I said, I am kind of the least extreme case. I got a job right away after that. There was no impact on my life in general. But yeah, that's what happened.
Sorry to interrupt, Taz, but I think we should do the intro once again because some parts were not being recorded, the audio, I mean. So I'll just do real quick the
Okay.
I'll just do real quick the intro.
Okay.
We would like to welcome everyone to the semi-official men's rights subreddit Discord server. Here in today's live stream, we're going to be talking about false rape accusations. We will be focusing on very specific examples, very famous ones, so everybody can be on the same page. And we're not going to be focusing on edge cases, so the most popular ones. And with us, we have our, a very regular user, Taz, who would like to give his account of an experience he had with a false accusation. So Taz, if you don't mind, could you please repeat the gist of
Sure.
your story?
Sure. No problem. Yeah. Basically, what happened was I was managing a branch facility for a financial institution in the Midwest in the U.S. And a young man and a young woman who were working for me basically had gone to their HR department, the HR department, human resources, to accuse me of inappropriate behavior and sexual harassment of the young woman. There was no evidence that I was doing that, but of course I had no evidence that I wasn't. So it was just 100% they said, I said. And the company, of course, had to protect itself, its reputation. So they very quietly let me go with a severance package and basically a non-disclosure agreement between myself and the company that there would be no accusation of any harm done, just reorganization or whatever. And what the company did not do was look into any reason these two people might have for making the accusation. And one of the things that I had done while I was working there was put in place security measures to protect the company against embezzlement from within the branch. And when I was let go, unfortunately, those restrictions were abandoned. And I found out from a source within the branch later on that those two people had both been let go and charged with embezzlement. So basically, I was accused falsely, and I had to take the consequence for it. They suffered no consequence for what they did with me, but they did end up getting rolled out of there just because they were embezzling, and I was just in the way. I had no, serious impact on my life. I got another job right away and just moved on with my life. But it could have gone very differently, and I don't think about it very often, and it doesn't really bother me. But I think it's important for people to know that these things, are not only possible in some situations, they're commonplace. This is just what happens. And so, yeah, thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Taz. We should get into the main part of this talk now, which is the news that Marlon Manson has been vindicated. It turns out that his accuser completely made up the whole thing. She's admitted it, and she has mentioned that she was basically pressured to do so by some other woman who was in some sort of domestic abuse spat. We don't know, the details of that particular thing, but it does sound a little bit like an excuse, really. It's very interesting. It's really quite interesting news, and of course, the papers who covered it when she was credible are mostly not covering it now, with a few exceptions. And this is one of them. Variety, surprisingly, is covering it. I mean, I think it's quite potent to show off famous people who are falsely accused, because it really kind of breaks the narrative that these things are rare when you have famous people who are a small, tiny subset of society, and lots of them are being falsely accused. So we've got Johnny Depp, we've got Marilyn Manson, we've got quite a few others. And of course, there are real accusations. There are real accusations. But the issue here is that false accusations damage the credibility of real victims, and they damage the men who they are aimed at. Primarily, they damage the men who they are aimed at. And it's actually kind of disgusting that people are letting this just play out. Because, I mean, as the feminists say, we shouldn't talk about false accusations, because real accusations are, they pretend that real accusations are the majority by, twiddling with the stats and pointing to like failed rape kit trials and stuff like that, without ever asking themselves how many of those were actually true. But we're not here to really debate how many of those are true. We're here to defend the truth and the idea of truth. The idea that we should shut up about these things, even assuming they're a tiny minority, is nonsense, and it's dangerous. Feminists absolutely refuse to shut up about victims who are in the minority. So why would we do that? After all, they talk about femicide and female domestic abuse victims, and we know these are only a tiny subset of society. So why would, according to their logic, why would we care about these fringe cases when the majority of relationships are not toxic and are not abusive? It's really a no-win argument. So we do actually have to care about these cases where somebody is getting destroyed purely because somebody lied, especially when we realize that a lot of these accusers have financial motives, as Taz pointed out, or other motives. If we go way back to the Salem witch trials, you read on about those online, you'll see that a lot of the accusers actually had financial motives or hated somebody, and it was just really a free-for-all purge of people trying to get rid of people they didn't like. It had nothing to do with actual witches. It was more about a group of people who, for example, wanted to get hold of somebody else's property. If you look through the cases, it's really quite interesting. And of course, if we move over to the lynchings in America, a lot of that was down to, well, most of it was down to hatred. Some of it was down to jealousy. But it was all centered around lies and false accusations. And if we can't talk about those sorts of things, we can't stop people lynching people, essentially, is my point here.
True. And when it comes to the people that want us to forget about like the false accusations, it's like they are holding us hostage, basically. They're basically saying, if you don't want like the real accusations to be shaken off, then you are gonna allow us to lie and make up false accusations. Otherwise, the whole system is going down and innocent people are gonna suffer. So they are holding innocent people as hostages in this negotiation because they know there's power in truth, and that's why they want to sneak in and tell their lies, because they know there's innocent people that are going to be hurt. So they're using our sense of morality against us, and they're taking those innocent people as hostages in that conversation. Another thing I wanted to point out is that when it comes to the Marilyn Manson case, this is a very prominent, famous person, which is the reason why this is like coming into light, which surprises me that the accuser was even disproven and is being passed on the tabloids. That's pretty commendable, but again, it's because he is famous. Because if Marilyn, well, I don't know his real name, Marilyn Manson is his stage name, but if he wasn't a famous goth punk rock musician, we would never hear of him. Like maybe in a tiny corner of a newspaper, it would say that some man was falsely accused or something, like maybe not even that. So many people are accused and the truth, falsely accused, and then the truth never comes up even years later. So that is a giant issue. So when something happens to someone who's famous, like we really need to take it into that context, into the context that if it were to happen to normal people, the effects would be so much exacerbated. Just like it happens with like cancel culture or something. Some people can totally withstand the power of some false accusations and some malicious people. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say. But you're totally in the right, Ma. Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
I was
yes.
just going to say, I've had these types of conversations around these other campfires, and from their perspective, some of them, the rationale is this: if attention is not paid to the victim of a false accusation, then the credibility of the actual accusers, the ones who have been victimized, their credibility is saved, right? It's protected by silencing somebody, for example, like me. If I don't talk about it, and if I don't, make clear that I am a victim of an abuse of that system, then the real victim of a sexual harassment or a rape or any type of sexual assault is their credibility is more solid as long as I'm quiet. Now, I mean, in the cold light of day, that argument's got a ton of holes in it. Not the least of which is that we live in the 21st century and people talk, right? I mean, if I never get a chance to, and I never will have a chance to speak to any power about this. But for example, I'm talking right here, right now. So it makes it pretty clear that, reputation and the credibility of a real victim notwithstanding, okay, we're not going to be silent anymore, and I have no motive to keep my mouth shut, right? I don't have anything on the line, and I'm not currently under any scrutiny for anything, right? So I'm just explaining what happened, but everything from their perspective springs from the idea that we ought not focus on things like truth and what we've all kind of, learned is real justice, that there is only, the reduction of harm to the oppressed and the continuing disempowerment of the oppressor. They cannot think another way. So things like, don't be foolish don't mean anything to them, right? That doesn't dissuade them. They're just like, no, this is how we're going to do, right? And unless and until there's enough voices like mine, then folks like Johnny Depp and Marilyn Manson, unfortunately, are outlier enough and different enough than my own situation. It's just difficult for people to put two and two together, and maybe by the time the public at large does put two and two together, they'll be angry enough that they'll overreact, and really start coming down with the wrath of God on false accusers. I don't want to see that happen, because having been an actual victim of numerous sexual assaults myself and not being believed and not being listened to, I get to ride like both sides of the pony, and the one thing I can, have everybody rest assured of is I will never see an ounce of justice in my life. It's not going to happen. Okay? But for just for the purpose of not seeing it get any worse, right? I think it's, Ma, as you said, it is really important for people to say no one is immune from this. Pop stars and movie stars and, we consider the elite, they're still vulnerable to this kind of activity. But the point is, for every one of them, there's 1,000 of me, and that's just the way things are. And it's my opinion, it's a lot more important for the previously unconcerned to know that if they get angry enough about this, they might just make it worse. So yeah, be concerned, be angry, be vocal, but don't be foolish. We see the results of being, foolish and short-sighted. It results in thousands and thousands of people like me, and at least a handful of people like Johnny Depp and Marilyn Manson. That, like I said, that's already bad enough. This isn't, there's we're either going backwards or we're going forwards. It's very difficult to just maintain a status quo like this. So, our choices are either allow it to continue getting worse or start to make it better. And start to, be vocal about the difference between, harm and oppression and truth and justice. They both exist, right? They're both part of life here in 2023. But the fact is that, we're going to have to resolve all of them, not just some of them. That's the way things are. That's the condition of being human. Male, female, or anything else. And I ask those same people all the time. I look at them and say, so your plan is to rely on providing more power to things like the courts, law enforcement, and corporate, human resources and corporate structure to protect you. That just doesn't look like a good idea to me. They
True.
don't have the kind of track record that I would give them that responsibility for.
Yeah,
I just wouldn't.
and their priorities are totally like they're not aligned with the truth. Their priorities are
Right.
covering up their asses.
Right. But yeah, all of those institutions I just mentioned, they exist, of and for themselves and themselves alone. And if there's an oppressor, if there's an unreasoning tyrant in all of this, it is that. And any group, any institution that, supports or is complicit with them is part of them. That's not my fault. That's just the way things are. Right. I mean, some of the darkest times in human history have all been punctuated by the fact that, people just looked the other way. Right. And when they got in trouble, they went and ran behind that thing that ended up swallowing them. That's, if you're a person, this can happen. That's just the way things
So
are.
I think
Hmm.
it's very true what you say about people not really putting two and two together. Because I've seen
Right.
people, when it comes to something that primarily targets men, like all
Hmm.
men, they tend to immediately try to separate like men. They try to make it
Yeah.
whatever issue, as long as it's not about men. So it reminds me a lot of, for example, police brutality, who
Hmm.
people are desperately trying to racialize that issue, and
Yeah.
obviously they ignore the fact that the majority of victims of police brutality are like men.
Yeah.
Even very petty issues like getting stop
Right.
and frisk. Majority is like men in general, from
Yep.
whatever race or background. And the
Yep.
same is coming, yeah.
Stop and frisk and profiling, for traffic stops, um, you know, uh, brutal and excessive responses, to by the police to the citizens. I told a woman of color once, I said, you got to understand that, I have about 8 times as much of a chance of any of those things happening to me as you do. And that has always been true. And I was like, I've been an adult longer than you've been alive, right? And I can tell you, that just because of the conditions of my birth, right? Um, I have no special protection from any of that. I really don't. And I was like, I talked to her about her because we were talking about her son. You know, her son is a young fella of color, right? A young black guy. And I said, gotta understand, it isn't about, the color of his skin, right? It's about the structure of his chromosomes, And if you want it, because we were talking about her son and having the talk, I said, if you don't mention any part of that, he is not going to understand. And I said, your neighbor up the way that doesn't have a son but has a daughter, well, that daughter is getting a talk too, but it's not about the police, it's about your son.
Oh yeah,
You know,
true.
you
Like
know.
the daughter
I
is
says, you
getting
got
to talk about you need to watch your drink in a club or something.
right. And I'm like, both of those are not targeting your son because of the color of his skin or his ethnic background. It's because he's your son. And of course after that their conversation kind of got really quiet, but I'm like, I'm only telling you how things are, and this is how they are. And I wish I could do more about it, but I really can't, you know. I do what I can, but sometimes it don't feel like that much. And
Mm.
I said it, but at least I understand, that these potentials for harm, and I don't mean just physical harm, but financial harm and social harm and influential harm, they're directed at us, And when I say us, I mean, I say, Y chromosome owners, you know. Uh, um, it's, it can't be consistently made into an issue of race over time. And it can't be made into an issue only of class, because again, if that was the case, Harvey Weinstein would have gotten off scot-free, and Johnny Depp and Marilyn Manson would have never seen the inside of a courtroom. But it ain't like that, It's like this. And like I said, this is the kind of thing that can't be left unattended. It can't just be let go of, looked away from, and ignored, because it will get worse. And, I tell them, my fear is not only that, other men and boys are going to be victimized. Probably sometimes my primary fear is that when this all falls apart, and it will, it might be so late in the game, that people become unreasonable and violent. And it's like, that's too many people to become unreasonable environment and violent. That's like 4 billion people. Too many. That'll take us out of the game. But when I say things like that, then people tell me, oh, it's not that bad yet. I'm like, well, clock's ticking.
Yeah, well, we do have some examples of things happening in the past. Like, we can't ever forget about one of the most well-known false accusations, like the case of Emmett Tilt, which some of our detractors, they do like to bring that up, not because it's like a false accusation, because they want to use that as an example of racism. But unfortunately, unfortunately, in some circles, some feminist circles I've seen, it goes both ways. It's like it depends on their lens. Doing
I think
certain like, oh, sorry, go ahead, Dark.
I mean, I would agree how it goes both ways. I can see how it's racist, and it's obviously a false accusation. I think the bigger issue of how it's seen in feminist circles, at least as of late, I don't know if you're aware, they're coming out with a movie now on Emmett Till, but it's not so much on him as it is about his mother. I mean, they're sort of trying to change the story to be more focused on the power of his mom and trying to use it as empowerment story now instead of really focusing on what it was, which was a boy, regardless of whether he was black, and that was a big part of it, and he was in the South at a time where it was hard to be a black person. But regardless of that, he was a boy who was falsely accused, and not only falsely accused, then murdered for it.
True.
But they're
And
trying to
again,
completely go away from that. And, they realize even with the race thing, though, it's still admitting it's a false accusation. So now they're just trying to say, oh, well, this is a woman story now because his mom, she kept the casket open and things like that. And yes, she was brave for doing so. But the story needs to be about the boy who died.
true. Like, we really can't forget about the fact that the only reason why he died is because they literally just believed, quote unquote, the victim. Like, and they didn't even, like, it wasn't even like, um, the accuser just said that a boy just whistled at her and make some grotesque comments and maybe some gestures, and that was it. That was enough to believe her and enough to like kill him. So this is like the danger that some people don't really understand. Like we have gone through the idea of just believing quote unquote the victim, and that's like the worst case scenario.
If you look at the Emmett Till article I sent up there, it seems that, as predicted, Emmett Till's accuser changed her story multiple times throughout the case. In the beginning, she was just saying that, like fairly standard things, but as it goes on, it changes. And we could probably go through some of the changes, maybe read the article if you guys want to.
Oh yeah, I'm
Yeah,
totally
sure.
down.
Okay, who wants to start?
What part do you want us to read? Like the whole thing, or just?
Oh, basically just the parts where, like how her story changed. Basically just the timeline. I haven't actually read it myself. It'd be interesting to do live.
Okay. So this is what was supposedly said in September of 1955. So the first time this was tried. In late September 1955, less than 1 month after Emmett was killed, Bryant Donham testified under oath during an evidentiary hearing in Bryant's trial. According to a trial transcript, Bryant Donham testified that she never saw Emmett again after August 24th, when he whistled at her at the couple's store. Question: when you got your pistol, Miss Bryant, where was this boy then? Or I should say, where was this man? Answer: when I turned around, he was getting in a car down the road. Question: did you rush back in the store then? Answer: yes. Question: had you ever seen this man before? Answer: no. Question: have you ever seen him since? Answer: no. 50 years later, in 2005, during the first of two federal examinations of Emmett's kidnapping and murder conducted by the FBI, Brian Donham told the FBI her then husband brought Emmett to her after he took him from his great uncle's home on August 28th in the middle of the night. According to a redacted FBI transcription of the interview, Brian Donham told an FBI investigator, advised that she was at home in Money, Mississippi with, a lot of this is redacted, by the way, so if it sounds weird, it's because it's a redacted word. When sometime during the night, Roy Bryant, J.W. Millam, and Kimbrell appeared at the home/store with Emmett Till, I think they probably asked me who, if I believe, because I really think no matter, I think Roy Bryant, told me he was going to take him back. Retired FBI agent Dale Killinger recalled this 2005 interview with Brian Donham with reached by CNN. He confirmed to CNN this redacted testimony in the FBI report was from Bryant Donham. Killinger says Bryant Donham told him she remembered that they brought him, Till, into her. She said Emmett didn't say anything. Killinger recalls of his interview with Bryant Donham. She did say, in 2005, something to the effect of, I could have identified him. So as far as I know, she's never said that she did state that the boy was Emmett Till, Killinger said. And
Wow.
the rest of it's the memoir. Yeah.
So did you notice how quickly they switched from calling him Emmett Till from a boy to a man? And he was 14 years old. Did you catch that? Oh, sorry. So yeah, at the beginning of the article, the first person who asked the question, who I presume is like the FBI or the journalist asking, he said, "When you got your pistol, Mrs. Bryant,
The
Where
first one
was-
was in the court in Mississippi in 1955. So it's a trial transcript.
Oh, a trial, yeah. But look how quick they switch from calling him from a boy to a man, even though he was 14 years old. Yeah, so it seems like they were trying to like engrave the severity of this, like trying to distance themselves from the idea that this wasn't like a boy that was like brutally beaten and then like hanged from a tree, I think. This was like a grown man, therefore more deserving of any punishment. Um, and I'm really not surprised that the story changed a couple of times, but the article kind of suggests that she already knew him, like the woman, the accuser, already knew Emmett Tilt, so maybe they knew each other. So it's kind of in the air as to why she would do such a thing to him. So it says grand jury declines to indict. In 2007, a Mississippi grand jury declined to indict Brian Dunham on charges. Wow. The charging accounts over time from Brian Dunham about her encounter with Emmett has fueled calls for the state of Mississippi and the federal government to reopen the case and conduct a full investigation, examining all the newly uncovered documents in contrast with previously known and reviewed evidence. In quotations, it has been a tremendous amount of trauma. I still feel the weight is on our shoulders. We found a new evidence, and so we just want justice served. And the person speaking is Terry Watts, Emmett's cousin, told CNN. CNN, has been unable to reach Brian Dunham. So that's the end of the article.
You'll notice that she was never actually put in prison for this. She was never arrested. There was an arrest warrant for her, which was recently discovered, but it was never acted upon, and the Supreme Court decided not to act upon it. So, yeah, she's never going to see the inside of a prison because of what she did.
True.
I mean, she was
even
involved in that.
even if they didn't act it at this point, I feel like the court would still let her slide because she's so old.
Yeah.
'Cause that's what they do with like a lot of elderly folk, is they try to like not diminish. That might be the word, but like lower the sentence if possible, since they don't have much life, unless, you know, they did something absolutely completely horrendous.
Like this, for example.
Yeah. Like, I don't
Yeah,
know
but
if
they would
the,
point out that she didn't technically kill him with, you know, her hands. She just
No,
abused
but
him.
she just made it so that he died. That's it's like you know, saying that the person who gave the orders isn't to blame for what the soldiers do.
No, and I agree,
You know,
but
it's
that's what the
yeah.
logic
But
goes by in court.
I
They go,
get,
well, she didn't actually
yeah.
do it. And so then judges are like, well, if she didn't actually do it, I mean, it was a mistake, and if she feels forgiveness, because apparently you can just say sorry and that solves everything.
Yeah, I know that you mean that that's what the lawyers are going to say and what the judge will probably accept, but yeah, I'm just like saying what I would say back to that, honestly.
True. And I don't know if any of you has ever seen the very old documentary called Eyes on the Prize, but it talks about it documents the civil rights era movement in Mississippi. And I saw it recently, and I had no idea, but at that specific time, Mississippi was being controlled by an extremely corrupt council of people. Obviously, I think at that time, not even black people could even vote, and they were really resistant the idea of integration, resistant the idea of voting rights for everyone. But they saw it all as like the morality of the North, the northern states, and they were like being like rebels resisting their influence because they thought they had their own way of living and such. But I'm really not surprised at all that, first of all, the case with Emmett Till was swept under the rug and in that time. I'm not surprised. And even to this day, there's so many, that specific time era, there's so many people who were killed or made to disappear, and they were all unsolved cases where nobody got charged. So this is like extremely common in the state of Mississippi at that specific time because of the levels of corruption there.
Not just Mississippi either, like all over the states around that time. I don't know if you ever heard of the story of the boy in the box.
Oh, I haven't. Could you tell us that one?
Granted, this was not an African American male, but this was a little boy who they actually just identified recently in the last couple years. He was, let me think of this. I think he was like 6 years old. And he was found dead, got killed by blunt force trauma in a box. And they had no ID. They didn't know who he was for like 40, 50 years or so. And he was discovered in Pennsylvania in the middle of the woods in a box. And it wasn't until recently they figured out his identity or anything.
Hmm.
And that's just a really famous case to name it. There's like so many others, but it was all over. It was Mississippi, it was the South, the North, the East, the West. I mean, little boys were missing and dead like there was no tomorrow in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Add that to the fact that Vietnam War happened in the 60s.
Oh, yeah. So, well, it totally makes sense that years later, the people growing up in that period were so akin to the idea of stranger danger because they were overcompensating for like everything around them, telling them that there is danger in every corner from people that may kidnap them and such. Makes sense there.
Yep, welcome to the land of the free to kidnap.
So there is an article about Marilyn Manson accuser who retracted the rape accusation. I'm gonna read the little extract from the Human Events magazine. So okay, so she says now she was manipulated by another woman known as Manson, his ex-girlfriend, Evan Rachel Woods. Now, a lot of people familiar with the case against Marilyn Manson, they know about the name, Evan Rachel Woods. So the girl says Smith Lane apologized to his lawyers and retracted her claim. She said she was manipulated by Mrs. Woods and Woods' associates to such an extent that she willingly spread publicly false accusations of abuse against Manson, who she dated for a brief time. I succumbed to pressure from Evan Rachel Woods and her associates to make accusations and blah 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 that were not true. Ashley Morgan Smith Lane, now 38, stated in a declaration. Smith Lane said that she was manipulated, saying horrible things about Manson, including rape, abuse, sadomasochism, torture. She went on a national TV talk show and said this, and now she claims that it was all fabrications and that Manson did not rape her. So I think this is a little bit of saving face moment, pinning all the blame on Mrs. Rain. What was her name? Evan Rachel Woods. Yeah.
I don't believe her.
So yeah,
I mean,
that
this
was,
is a
yeah, I
woman
was
who's
getting to
lied
that.
before.
Yeah, I know.
It's like, oh, I can fix this with another false accusation because, this isn't my modus operandi or anything. Like making up stories about people. Yeah, that's
Wait,
no,
so
don't
she's
believe me, you
saying that
cried
she
wolf.
got pressured by someone to do it.
Yeah, that's
Is
the
that my
insane part.
understanding?
Yeah, exactly. So she's saying that she was being pushed and manipulated and coerced to saying those things because, well, again, anyone who's familiar with the case knows the name of Evan, like Rachel Woods, because she has a vendetta against Manson, which is something that Manson said before, like, be careful with that woman or whatever he says.
Yeah, I can see my mom doesn't believe her, obviously, because she lied before. On the other hand, like, I do not doubt it. Um, when it comes to Hollywood and stars being accused, it's always mysterious how suddenly it started with one or two women and it becomes 30.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It is
You know,
weird
there-
how that happens.
and it's not unknown that, like, when these things come up, they always when they accuse them out of Hollywood, they immediately are asking all the female like co-workers, and they all seem to like show up at the same place and talk about it. It does seem a little bit like a team of effort, so that wouldn't surprise me if she was coerced. I don't know if she was really like coerced or manipulated that much, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was a team up effort.
Yeah, it's everyone else's fault except mine o'clock. It's like I would. I'm not familiar with the case, but I'd bet money they were just in cahoots, and they wanted to ruin him for fame, glory, money, whatever you want to, whatever reason you can come up with, and then the co-liar probably did something that annoyed the other liar, and so the other liar comes forward and says it's all lies just to get back at the other person. I mean that's my theory based on how it would be interpreted if she was a man. If she was a man, it would be assumed that she was lying about being manipulated by the other person, especially if the other
So
person was a woman.
I just
So
wanted to
it's
give a different theory to what you were saying, Ma, because in my opinion, yeah, they were two in cahoots, but then the accuser, the primary one, she was getting too much heat. People were like investigating her and realizing that a lot of her story didn't make any sense, so she couldn't take it. That's my theory. So she basically spilled the beans and threw everyone else on like under the bus. So I just
yeah,
wanted to
that
say that's my
works.
theory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jumping in first and admitting wrongdoing has a weird immunizing effect when other people go down as well. Like if you're taking down a huge number of people, it can mean that you yourself actually slip through the cracks and get a much lesser punishment than you would have.
Yeah.
Like she can now turn evidence on other people if it ever actually comes to that, which it might not.
And this was taken to court, or this was settled?
I'm not sure, honestly. I haven't been
Well, I'm
following
just
the
curious.
Manson thing.
I'm just curious because, and this is a problem I've personally always had with Hollywood men. I hate that I see so many accusations made against them, and I believe some of them. Like Harvey Weinstein, I'm sorry. We all sort of know it.
Yeah, and yeah, the black
Let's be
actor, I
honest.
can't remember the name.
R. Kelly.
No, well, yeah, him too, actually, but the super old one, what's the
Bill
name?
Cosby.
Oh, Bill
Oh,
Cosby.
yeah, that one. He
Oh,
was
you
found
said
guilty of slipping like
yeah.
drugs into women's drink or something.
But what I can't see in is there are other people like This is an article I'm gonna bring up that I think I sent to you, Ma. I know he's not the greatest character to do this with, but nonetheless, I think it makes point. Gene Simmons of Kiss.
Haven't heard of this one.
So Kiss is a famous rock band. For those who don't know, if we somehow have people who are living under a rock. Yeah. And so Gene Simmons is the bass player of the group. And he does have a reputation around women in terms of being a bit of a cheater and a live commentator, as we'll put it. But he had a lawsuit put against him for sexual battery. And originally, I think my understanding was he either did settle or he was going to settle. And then in the end, he just chose, like, all of a sudden not to do so. He decided he was going to go fight for his innocence because he knew he was innocent and he was getting tired of, like, all the slander and stuff, and no one could really prove anything. And so he said he was going to prove his innocence. And that's the thing, is there's so many guys in Hollywood who just settle too, which makes it worse because it seems like settlement's an admission of your guilt. They just settle because they're so scared of, like, the drama and stuff. But it's like, you really need to fight because when you settle, you're letting them know they're allowed to win.
What are we fighting?
So I just posted a link of a very extreme case of a woman just crushing her own head into a window store to try to accuse the guy she was in. So again, we really can't have a standard in which we're supposed to blank believe all certain groups of people, because it just makes no sense. We gotta treat everyone like an individual. And even if we believe that we do have a problem to correct, we can't just overcorrect and create another problem. Like, when something very interesting, because, like, again, I saw the Eyes on the Prize documentary, and Malcolm X has a quote that says, if somebody stabs you with a 6-inch knife but only takes away 3 inches, they haven't really repaid you or amend any problems. So the solution here, when it comes to, if we were to believe that false accusations are a minority and we have an epidemic of rape against women, then the solution is not like an overcorrection in which we declare that we need to believe all women making any accusation, because that just destroys everything in the other direction.
That's the thing, though, too. You see it on TV, you see it in police training. That is all they're being taught, is to believe all women.
Wait, what
Just
country
to
is that?
believe every accusation, everything going on.
What country is that grocery store? What country was that grocery store in? Where the woman slammed her own hand, then started accusing people. What country is that?
Apparently, it seems to be the UK.
The United Kingdom? Hello?
I believe so.
How come the person just told a story and just now just silent? What?
Yeah, sorry, Tark, what were you saying before? Oh yeah,
Yeah,
something about training of police. You were on that.
No, I got a quick question. Well, in your story, like, where was that? Where did that take place?
Which one? The one with the woman crashing herself into the.
The hand thing, the window hand.
I don't recall any of us saying anything about a hand, so
Wait, what?
I have no idea.
No, what was the story that you told? You said like a woman did something to herself. That was the story you told, right?
Oh, you mean the link that I just posted? Like, yeah, there's the link
Opinions.
here in the Saturday Text channel. A CCTV camera of a woman who crashed her own skull head into a Windows store. Apparently, it's like in the UK. I don't know, but you can watch the
Oh,
video there.
okay. I don't need to watch. I don't need to click on it. I just need to know the information from the
Sure, you
from
can sure,
relating
you can
source.
click the link and get all the info.
No, I'm not going to click on it. This is
Okay.
Discord. Okay, so it was
Um,
in the UK, in the United Kingdom. Okay.
Have no idea. Listen, yeah, we can talk about that in the aftermath, but right now, let's Dark keep talking about So
The
what were you
police.
talking about, Dark? Yeah, the police training. Yeah, what were you saying about that?
Just how it's become a believe all women thing. You know, that's sort of like how they become trained. You know, story that's come to mind. My dad has a friend who was on the bus during COVID because he had to get to work, and he was asking this woman. He asked this woman if she could please socially distance herself because she sat right next to him, and he does have some health issues. She immediately got mad and attacked him.
Wow.
And so they got off on the next stop. He was still like, she was still attacking him. And when they got off, the cops showed up. And the only reason he didn't get in trouble because they were going to try and go and get her off of him. Because, okay, so here's what happened. She started attacking him. They were on the bus, and the bus stopped. And so he tries to get off. She keeps attacking him. They get off the bus. He, to defend himself, grabs the cane that he's using because, as I said, he's got certain issues. Hits her with the cane in self-defense. And she's getting up, and while she's getting up, that's when the police show up. The only thing that saves him from them going, oh, you abused this woman, da da da, is the fact that she ran away when they showed up.
Wow.
They showed up, and she ran for her life.
So yeah, clearly not the most mentally stable person. Yeah.
No, but like the police showed up, and they were starting to get out, and they were already like starting to, she immediately got up and ran, but like he said, like they were starting to ask a question when she was running. Because they were walking towards them and trying to ask a question, like, what the hell's going on, stuff. I'm just sitting here, I'm like, and that's the assumption they make. They go to these situations, they don't ask really a two-sided story, they just sort of choose to believe the woman. Yes, there are horrible things that happen to women, but putting believe all women in police training is going to put more men and boys in jail.
Yeah. Well, and in general, like, it really messes up everything from the investigation. Like, Taz mentioned exactly that before you were here, but by putting, like, innocent men in jail for crimes they did not commit, you're, like, by default letting the real guilty criminals out to commit even more crime. So it makes everything worse, you know? So yeah, it creates like a constant vicious cycle because, like, let's go back to the rape crime. Like, like the majority of rapes are committed by the same repeated offenders who get up and rape a bunch of people, innocent people. Um, it's not like different rapists raping different people. It's like there's repeat offenders. So yeah, that's a vicious cycle that happens when we
Yeah.
have such standards like those.
And that's the thing too. Taz makes a good point. You know, right now, sadly, jails are overflowing. And that's why when COVID happened too, you know, giving people more house arrest was more popular. So now you're telling me you're more willing, you got to prioritize who you're putting in there. You're gonna prioritize some kid who was falsely accused by a woman for rape, than maybe a gang member, a Latino king, or you know, kings or
Oh
whatever
yeah,
on the street that, you know, is helping with training kids to
true.
join the gang. He gets to be on
Yeah.
house arrest. He's more dangerous in my eyes than the kid that got
Mm.
falsely accused. I may not know
And
it yet that kid's innocent, but
mm,
you're telling me that gang member gets to only be on house arrest, so he could still just walk on his lawn and be like, "Hey, come here." Nah, no.
so, and this is like the horrible thing about the prison system in the United States, because like some private prisons, they actually get money for getting people like inside the jails, like getting them there, like government subsidies and such. So they actually have an incentive to overcrowd, like prison facilities, and they have an incentive to then build more prisons so they can keep putting more people in them. So they don't really care at all if people are being like falsely accused or not. They just want more people inside those jails because they're getting money for it. So there's a very perverse like incentive, and this is all happening. There's a collusion of a lot of interest. For example, the interest of people that believe that there's not enough rapists in jail. Like they believe that just people are raping everywhere all the time and people are
Yeah,
never
rape
getting
culture.
convicted. Yeah, exactly, that rape culture. So they believe that, there's a rapist in every corner and we are not doing enough. So therefore, we need to put more people in jail, like by default. And then you have the money
And
incentive
and
of
and
the
they
prison
claim
system.
institutions are helping with rape culture. It's like, look, uh, if an institution is helping, if an institution is not doing something about a certain attitude, okay, yeah, that can be upsetting. But you know, you can't just sit here and say, oh, there's a culture of rape. You know, college campus, they claim there's rape culture. There are people who get raped. That does not mean they're facilitating that culture. You know, it's the frat that may be facilitating that culture, or the people around the person who committed the rape. You know, a culture indicates a large amount. No one is being taught to rape. Culture is something that you are taught, that is passed on, that is your identity of community and stuff.
Oh yeah.
Rape, it cannot be any of those. It is not any of those.
Oh
And people
yeah.
do not seem to understand that.
It's like, the real problem is that a lot of those people or detractors, they want to label a lot of gray areas as rape because they don't like the uncomfortable gray areas. So, for example, two normal adults who get drunk and then they regret having some uncomfortable or maybe disgusting or degrading sex. And then, one of them says, I really regret doing this stupid thing. I
Yeah.
never want to do that again. Like,
And to
yeah,
add on to that, you know, one of the biggest problems too on campus is they let people know they can go search for the services of victims if they feel that way about that kind of situation. If they went and consensually chose to have a sexual relationship with someone and they don't feel comfortable next day, the universe is like, oh, it's okay, you can still show up to a women's center, get the victim, we'll treat, we'll give you that kind of treatment or something. And that they should not be teaching that. What they should be teaching is for the women who come in there the day after with that embarrassment to own up to it and to be responsible. You are not a victim. Case and point. You're not a victim. You made a mistake. You grow up. You own up to the mistake. You move on.
True. And not only that, like, for example, when we talk about like actual victims of people who really went through horrible traumatic experience, there is no two things about it. There is, we need to help them, we need to make them stronger, and most importantly, we need to give them the tools for it to never happen again, you know? Because you realize when you talk to victims of sexual assault that like rapists, they actually select for their victims. They make sure they're very timid. They can't say no, you know. They're very they select for neurotic traits, for people who feel like they don't have any power to say no or to oppose them. They look for people who are weak. So I think that when it comes to making victims stronger, that is the solution so it never happens again. And FBI statistics always show that if you make it harder for a rapist, they go away. They actually don't even bother because, like, rapists are not gonna try to rape a woman that is struggling for her life, like, ready to kill the rapist, you know, do whatever it takes to get out of the situation because they realize, like, they're not gonna be able to maintain an erection with someone who is absolutely fighting for their lives, clawing, like doing whatever it can, even some other things that actually I'm not going to mention because it's too disgusting. But I do think that's the actual way of helping victims instead of trying to portray their experience as some sort of example of a rape culture or how victimhood should be put on a pedestal, because I truly believe that that really hurts them more than anyone, and it's all done for political gain, which it is insidious and disgusting. Because if you ask people, if we were to think who a rapist would love to be surrounded with, a rapist would love to be surrounded by women who feel like there is a rapist in every corner, that they're weak, that there's nothing they can do, that they're victims, you know. That actually attracts them more than anything else, you know. So yeah, I wanted to say that. I don't know if anybody wants to continue talking. Oh yeah, we should wrap this up.
All right, thank you, Mal. I just want to say that we actually had I did an interesting little tweet earlier. We found an article about a women-only chat group on Facebook where they were basically talking quite happily about how they stabbed their boyfriends with forks and things like that, how they abused them, posting pictures of them, like obscene pictures without consent, all that sort of stuff, like scorning.
That sounds like a group of
Yeah.
crazies.
Yeah, 200,000 of them. And I think that the reason that these people put forward the idea of rape culture is because they're projecting onto men what they do. That's my hunch personally, because they always go on about locker room talk and stuff like that, but you always seem to get these groups of women doing this. So I'm pretty sure that while I can't speak for there being locker room talk the way they think it exists, although I'm not sure that it really does, there is certainly at least proof that there are FDS style chat rooms all over the internet where they talk about stuff like this. The Amber Heard Facebook group is probably another example of this, but we haven't been able to get in there to see because they're very tight on the door. But I am not saying that there aren't men who are like this. We found a couple of little holes where men are very say disgusting things about women. But I am saying that there are quite a few groups like this that make me think that there's like this rape culture as a theory is a projection, let's say. Sorry, I'm getting tired and I'm not explaining myself very well.
It's
That's
okay.
okay.
We can wrap it up if you want.
Okay. All right. Thanks everyone for coming. And I would just like to say thanks to Blue for spotting that the video was silent at the beginning, and sorry to everyone who tuned in earlier and couldn't catch the original intro. We'll have to trim that off. Mal, if you could give us the dates and times, or Darkisha, do you want to take us out?
Yeah, I'll take us out. Thanks everyone for coming. This has been the Men Human Rights Discord server. We're the semi-official Discord server. The Men Human Right, the Human Men subreddit. And we always love hearing from you guys. If you ever have topic recommendations, please message Mal or Ma or myself. We love hearing them. We'll try to get them on. And we will see you all next week, Saturday, 7:30 UK, 1:30 Central.